Welcome to Digital Audio Production. Today's lesson is going to be about my favorite subject, microphones. Today we're going to talk about microphones and some of my favorite types. And then in the next lecture we'll learn about microphone patterns and microphone placement. First, let's talk about the way that dynamic mics are designed. In recording, there are different types of microphones depending on what you're going to record and how loud or soft the signal is that you're going to record, how you want it to sound in your production, and in the variation in sound, whether it's loud all the time or it gets soft and then very loud. So all of those are different things, as well as what type of instrument, where the mic needs to go, if you're running around or standing still, if it's on a camera, there's so many different decisions about recording. So let's first talk about the design of a dynamic mic. It works kind of like your ear, where you have a magnetic coil, and as the sound pressure comes in and hits a diaphragm, that coil moves. And that coil that's moving is in a magnetic field, and it records the change in voltage when the sound hits the diaphragm and the coil is moving. What that creates is an exact replica of the sine wave that's coming into that microphone. And then you get a recording of the sine wave through that dynamic microphone. The advantages of this type of design: it is very rugged, it's very dependable, it's not very expensive, it can handle very high sound, so you can stick it in front of a very loud amplifier, for example, in front of drums. They're usually low cost, between $80 to $200 for most of them. If the temperature changes or humidity, they stay pretty stable and they sound good. Some common microphones, the two most common on the planet, are the Shure SM57 and SM58. If you've seen any concerts or talking or live sound, you've seen these everywhere. Usually for instruments, the SM57 is in front of instruments usually, and the SM58 having a grill there, it's made for vocals so that when you're talking or singing into it, you have that shield, and the sibilant sounds S and also the P's and T's don't sound as harsh into that microphone. Another microphone I have there is for a kick drum, D112, being a bigger mic, a bigger diaphragm, capture those low frequencies. In the recording studio, you commonly find condenser mics. Condenser mics are more sensitive, but they have a very accurate recording. It's a different principle completely from dynamic mics. You have, it's called an electrostatic principle, and it's made out of a condenser, which are two plates. One plate is fixed and one plate is movable, and those plates can be made out of different materials. The two plates form a capacitor, and what happens with this microphone is you turn on an electric charge. In this case, for recording, it's 48 volts DC. Where do you turn that on? When the mic is plugged into a mixer, there's usually a 48 volts switch that you can power this mic up. You'll notice if you plug this mic into a mixer and you forget to do that, you get no signal or recording at all. So it has to be charged up with 48 volts DC. It forms a charge, and the capacitor reacts to the sound wave coming into it. It reacts a lot faster than the diaphragm that's an electromagnetic principle. So when the sound hits this front plate and then it hits the back plate and there's air in between, it's already pre-charged with that 48 volts, and it reproduces that sine wave. So the way the capacitor works is there's an equation Q equals CV. Q is the electrical charge that we just talked about, and capacitance, and the V is the voltage. And the substance between the plates is, in this case, air. So you apply 48 volts DC to this capacitor mic, and the voltage is directly proportional to the charge. And so the more sound pressure coming in, it changes the voltage proportionally to that. So what you get is a perfect reproduction of your sine wave, but in a more accurate more accurate design. Some advantages and disadvantages of this are it's very low noise level. So when you plug in this microphone and you turn up your gain, you'll hear a low noise level in the background. It has a large dynamic range, so you can be very soft, but you can get very loud. It's a smoother, more natural sound, being that this reacts faster to sine waves as compared to a dynamic microphone. It can have a flat frequency response, which means it's responding to your recorded sound exactly as it was in the studio. And you can make these in a very small design. They have very small mics, for example, that are placed over cymbals in a drum set. Some disadvantages: if you have super high sound pressure, it could be distorting or damaged. They are definitely more expensive. These microphones go from a few $100s to thousands of dollars. The ones that I purchase are generally between $400 and $2,000. And they are affected by temperature and humidity. That's why they are usually used in a studio. Some common condenser mics are the Shure KSM series. There's one on top here, the KSM 32. And this one in the picture you can see is held by a shock mount. It's so sensitive that if you were going to touch it, it would make a lot of noise in your recording. So the shock mount suspends it in the air, and then the shock mounted case on the bottom is attached to your mic stand. Here's one of those small mics I was talking about, an Neumann U87, or this is the KM184. This is one of the best microphones ever. It reproduces sound exactly like you heard it. I use it on cymbals, violins, things, acoustic guitars, things that are harder to reproduce. And here's another microphone that is less expensive, Rode, those are produced in Australia, NT1, and those are good mics to start with and learn how to record with without spending a lot of money. I put the U87 here. That's a very expensive mic, but it's one of the best microphones ever used in recording as well. Another microphone design is ribbon microphone, and it's similar to that diaphragm from the dynamic mic, but instead it has a moving coil, and it has a thin ribbon, and it's suspended in a magnetic field. And what's nice about this microphone is it has a big range, but it doesn't get distorted with loud sounds. For example, trumpet players like to use ribbon microphones. It preserves the sound, and it doesn't sound shrilly or harsh. Some advantages and disadvantages of the ribbon mic are it has excellent sonic characteristics, very warm sounding, which is great for those trumpets, saxophones, gentle high frequency response, which is why it's so good with trumpets. It doesn't get too reactive on those high trumpet sounds. Disadvantages are they are definitely more fragile. They are more expensive as well, and you need to be careful about any gain that you use on that microphone. Here's the most common ribbon mic, the Royer 121. This is what they look like. You'll see those a lot on TV if you see recording in front of mostly trumpets, violins, things like that. Here's an inexpensive version called the Nady, N-A-D-Y, but it doesn't sound as good as the ribbon mics made by Royer. Some other microphone types for doing film cameras, you'll have a shotgun mic. That's an electret condenser design, which is basically what we just learned about with capacitors. Is there'll be a permanent charge on that microphone, and you'll have fountain power. And those pick up sound from everything, since you're usually using them on a camera or with a camera, everything in the sound field that you can kind of see or hear while you're filming. Some of the popular ones are made by Rode, AKG, and Sennheiser. Another popular mic is a tube microphone, which is a very fat design. It sounds really warm, but they take extra power in order to power up those tubes, so they come with an extra power supply. The one you're seeing on this picture is an AKG solid tube. And a few other microphones. When you do conferencing or you want sound from a rounded table discussion, people use PZM mics. They're used for other things too. Sometimes drummers use those. And those microphones pick up sound just like a capacitor microphone, and again, used for conferencing. And drummers sometimes strap those to their chest to get the sound from their perspective. It's an interesting way to use those. Sometimes people tape them on the walls to get some room sound. So PZM mics. Crown is the most common maker of those microphones. And then microphone design are designed to use, as I said in the beginning of this lecture, for different things. Handheld microphones are the most common. They have the case that you can hold on to, and that sound when you're holding it will not transmit into your recording. Stand-mounted microphones, like the condenser microphones, come with a shock mount. The shock mount is hooked to the microphone stand instead of the microphone directly. Lavalier mics, as in this picture, are clipped to your clothing, usually used in interviews for acting, things like that. Contact pickup is a little round microphone that you attach to a guitar or a violin to pick up sound if there is not a plug in there. And then a shotgun mic on cameras. So let's look at some of my favorite sites for microphones. So we'll start with Shure. The microphone information is really vast, and my best advice is to try microphones that people have and see how they use them, and then read about them from the manufacturer, read about the specs and the microphone frequency response to see if it might work for your application. There's just a lot of choices. So Shure has a lot of microphones. If you go to products, you'll see microphones, and it tells you what they're for. So it gives you an idea, and whether you want wireless or wired. Usually for studio recording, you use wired sound. So let's look at the ones we talked about. SM series, the SM27 instrument microphone. You can see it's $99. And it gives you information about what it's used for, bass, guitar, stringed instruments, woodwinds, drums, and percussion, and how to hook it up. It's an XLR cable, which is a three-prong cable. And then it gives you specifications. Frequency response is 40 to 15,000 hertz. So you wouldn't necessarily use this on cymbals for studio, but you might use it for cymbals and live sound. They're not going to capture that super high frequency above 15,000 hertz. And let's see. And then it gives you support, like it gives you the different ways you can clip it on. So mic clip, this is where you put the microphone, and then this screws onto a microphone stand. And there's a windscreen in case you're outside, because if you're in a windy place, wind will ruin your recording every time. There's a different capsule on there as well. So there's a lot of information on these microphones. Let's look at the SM58. So this has a bigger grill, and there's video on this microphone that you can watch. It has specifications here, 50 to 15,000, so it starts at a little higher. So if you had a low instrument, it'd be better to use the SM57. It also goes to 15,000 hertz. And really the difference in this is that capsule, that if you're speaking or singing into it, it softens out those hard sounds that you make with your mouth. So here's some other things I wanted to show you. And AKG has a great site, and I thought I'd show you this AKG D112 microphone. And it's a big fat microphone for kick drum. And what I liked about this is it has, which all of the sites do, the polar pattern of the microphone. So you can see this is a cardioid, which is a heart-shaped pattern. And the frequency response, it basically captures good frequency in the low range and then some in the high range. So this would not be a good vocal mic, not be good for anything in the middle, guitars, pianos, but very good for kick drum, low instruments. Again, from the AKG site, this is polar patterns of another mic called the 414. And I think I'll go to AKG's site to show you that. But it shows you different patterns for cardioid, very sensitive in the high range, flat frequency response. figure 8 pattern. We're going to talk about these in the next lecture, how to get these different patterns. Hypercardioid, omnidirectional, and a wide cardioid. We'll talk about that in the next lecture. So if I want to just go back to AKG, microphones. So the microphone I was just showing you is one that I really love, and I own the C414. And it's a more expensive microphone. They're about $1,500. But it has that flat, or I take it back, it's $1,100. But it has a flat frequency response, and you can change the pattern of this microphone with a button in the front. These are really great for recording because you can use them for so many different instruments and vocals, and they sound great. So it's a very common microphone. And again, they have videos, the specs, accessories that goes with them, all on their website. Let's look at another company that I love, the Neumann microphones, made in Germany. These microphones are really the best in class. They're more expensive. They're super solid. They reproduce things exactly as you would want them, as you would think they would sound. So I think, yes. So here's a TLM 103. This is a microphone I've recorded with a lot. It tells you what they're for in the directional pattern. All of the specs for this microphone. They're super low noise. And then it has it. I like this side. It has the diagram. So this is a cardioid microphone. You can see how flat the frequency response is over the whole range, and then accentuates the highs. So you can use this on almost anything. Then it has how other people used it. It has recordings, what they did. There's just a lot of information. Neumann makes some great microphones for cymbals as well. So let's look at their. So it has a nice section where it shows you all of the different recommendations on how to use their microphones and different applications. So if we look for, so I'm trying to find drums. Of course, I can't find it right now. So let's look at, let's see, vocals. All right, so these are some of their vocal mics that you'd see. It has, and you can pick them by pattern. So if, for example, if I want a cardioid microphone, it gives you all the microphones that have that pattern. So these are some of the microphone companies that I like. There are a lot. And again, I encourage you to try microphones from various studios or various people that you know that are doing recording, and check them out on whatever you want to record with. It's really important for your vocals, especially, that you get a microphone where you like the sound that it's recording. Next time, we're going to talk about microphone characteristics in these polar patterns that I mentioned in this lecture. And then we'll talk about microphone placement as well.